Thought I'd just go live to not only answer some questions that people might have with regards to avoidant attachment styles, their dating and relationships, but also because I also want to promote my course that's coming out tomorrow in Sydney, Australia time. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, answer any and all questions people might have on what they might be going through, what they've experienced with avoidant attachment, and also just to take things off the back of this too, to also be like, hey, if you're looking for heartbreak-related recovery stuff, I've got you covered with this course that I'm releasing tomorrow. So anyways, welcome to everyone who's joining. Thank you very much for joining this very spontaneous live. Just to kick this off, if anyone has any questions that they'd like me to answer, feel free to just put them either in the chat or in the question box below, preferably the question box because it makes it all orderly for me to get through, and we can take things from there. One thing that I do also want to start with by saying is I know that I got a lot of really good questions from people in my request box at the moment looking for very specific help with regards to their situation. And I just want to say I can't really offer direct advice because counselors can't do that. But if you are looking for some of the stuff, I will do these spontaneous Q&As every now and then where I can maybe go into a bit more detail and share an opinion because professionally that is allowable and it doesn't go against my boundaries. So firstly, Beckley81, thank you very much for starting this off. Is a temper common with avoidant attachment? Yes, because even though people who feel their emotions more readily are able to express themselves and also not have like volatile anger, people with avoidant attachment, you've got to remember, they have often suppressed a lot of their anger. So when they are triggered, they're triggered hard and they can go into a wild rage. Think of, say, as a stereotype, that upper lip, very crusty old man who sort of keeps everything put together, but the minute something's out of line, he just snaps and it's like everyone is on high alert. And that is very much the case even for women who have avoidant attachment where they just seem really put together and all it takes is just one trigger for them to just go boom. And it's, very visceral to see. On the flip side too, you may even notice that these people have a tendency to also cry quite spontaneously and you're like, where did that come from? But it's often because all of that repressed emotion is just coming up from time to time, where it just naturally, they almost have like a moment of what we call emotional constipation, where it just brims to the surface. So it can be quite random at times for people to receive that, where they're like, what the hell? I didn't expect this. For example, you might just ask a very simple question like, hey, what are your goals for the future? And for the avoidant attacher, they just literally burst into tears being like, oh my God, this is too much for me. So that's my answer to the question. Now answering some of these other questions that are here too. By the way, just want to say, this is me doing shameless promotion. My course Heartbreak Grief Relief drops tomorrow. It's at pre-sale at $50. If you are currently going through a bad breakup with an avoidant attacher, please feel free to go check out the link in my bio to purchase that. Shameless promotion aside, let's get back into things. So with regards to the next question, hi, my ex just left me a month ago without a proper breakup and now saying I didn't love him. Well, that's shit. And also not a fun experience to go through. A lot of avoidant attachers struggle with words of affirmation and aren't very good at expressing how they feel towards someone else because they also don't really do a lot of that for themselves. So even if they did that, I just want to say it doesn't mean they didn't care about you. It just might be a case of they don't have the capacity to show that care. Following question by eclaire.dean. How do I express my needs, expectations to an avoidant without triggering their need for independence? It's going to be hard to answer this because I don't know the person that you're referring to, but let's just take it generally speaking as this. In the beginning stages of dating, they're not usually going to be activated by your needs and requests and your wants and your needs or your boundaries. In fact, usually they're quite compliant with that and they think, oh, this is a nice change of pace. But the minute that commitment and intimacy starts to co-develop and things start to, as things start to unfold in the relationship and also to develop between both of you, that's when things start to really show up. And that's when for the avoidant attacher, all those, requests and, wants and needs of yours start to feel like demands, control, and manipulation. That's generally how it goes. For specific instances, depending on the person, it's very hard to actually get your wants and needs met with someone who's in the severity of their avoidant attachment, because for a lot of them, they may feel like you're too much, this is too needy, and they may push away completely. There's not much you can do in that sort of situation, and it's really hard to try and bridge the gap. Normally what I tell with my clients when they're trying to do this work with an avoidant person is I often say, look, if you want to have a conversation where you talk about what your wants and needs, I highly recommend you do the following, which is go for a walk with them or do an activity with them where you're not sitting down and having these conversations face to face, because it can be quite triggering for them to go through that. When they're out on an activity and they're not so focused on the environment and feeling trapped and also feeling like, oh God, this is too personal, they have that freedom to actually feel like, oh good, I can actually feel a sense of, I don't have to feel like I'm trapped in a room with another person, and they actually can have conversations where they'll be like, oh, okay, this feels good. I can actually interact with my partner now. And they generally can be quite receptive to what you have to say and share, by all means, your wants and needs with them in that particular situation. I want to also make it very clear that a lot of avoidant attachers are excellent people pleasers. They can say, yep, that's fine. Yep, I'll do that. Yes, I'll go to therapy, but never action any of this, because a lot of them have grown up to tell you what you want to hear, but don't have any intention of taking any accountability or action for a lot of that stuff too. So please bear in mind that if you see a lot of that, it's not really a good indicator for where things are going to go. For the avoidant attachers who are more self-aware and want to do the change, they will often be the ones being like, I'm going to therapy to work on this because I don't like myself and I don't like the way this is impacting my relationship. So you may find that for those individuals, you just simply expressing the fact that it's like, this isn't working for me, I think we really need to consider where we're at with our relationship, can often be the panic button for them to be like, crap, I need to do something about this. And that can activate them into more of a fear of abandonment mode. But typically you'd only see this with an individual who wants to work on the relationship, realizes they have a problem worth fixing, also has a partner that they're worried about losing. And it doesn't mean to say that the ones who do leave you never cared about you at all, but it's just to say that for some individuals, their willingness and readiness for change will be greater than others. So that's the best way that I can try and answer that one. It is tricky because, like I said, it's case by case. And you having a conversation with one of these individuals may yield a whole different reaction to some who are much more, available to what you have to say. Let's go with this next one. How to go no contact with an avoidant when you live with them and still love them. Yeah, that's really rough. And I got to tell you, it's similar if you're also a colleague at work with this person, because it makes it damn hard. I'm going to be brutally honest. It is so unfair to love someone and also to be with an avoidant who's broken up with you and you're still in contact with them, living with them, and or also working with them too. Because outside of quitting your job or moving out and severing a lease, it's very hard to actually heal off the back of that properly because you're still cohabitating with that individual. So in that context, the best way to do it, I find, is almost a bit like narc recovery, which is you want to almost go into a phase of grey rocking where you just keep things very civil. You just talk about, the weather, you talk about, very shallow related topics, but you don't want to necessarily, engage with them too much because it can just be so damn painful to work through that. Which leads me on to the next thing, which is if you still love them and they're not wanting to work with you on their stuff, then I highly recommend journaling about, how you're feeling about this, whether it be writing like letters to your ex or your avoidant partner, for instance, that you're still with, and just really feeling the love that you have for this person, because with it will then come rage and anger and frustration for how you're being treated. Because quite frankly, it's really damn annoying to be with someone who's not wanting to actually express themselves and actually commit with you. So again, similar to the previous question, tricky to answer because some of these are case by case sort of bases, but I will say it's really hard, almost impossible to go no contact with an avoidant when you still live with them. You kind of have to settle for what I call low contact, where you try and limit the amount of interactions you have with them and you keep it really superficial and shallow and find other ways to enjoy your life outside of them. I've gone through this with people that I've been with, back in the day, and I got to tell you, it was not a fun experience to go through. But the minute that you get into more of a phase of feeling like you can tap into some of that frustration, that's when you won't feel like you're, waiting and holding out for them to change and love you. You'll get to a point where you're like, yeah, this isn't working for me. I'm not having fun with this. So next question. What do you do if your avoidant ex broke up with you, now comes back to see if they want to try again? There was a girl who was told not to worry about they were sleeping post-breakup. Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest. I've had many clients who've gone through this sort of situation before too, and I feel like this is an important message that I'm going to just share in this particular case. So firstly, I'm glad to hear that they recognize that they want to try again. That can be commended, and I want to say fantastic. However, many avoidant attachers who also have underlying patterns of sex addiction do have a tendency to say things like, oh, don't worry about her, she's not a problem, or he's not a problem, don't worry about that. That person is usually their way of disconnecting from you when intimacy builds up. For them, when they don't feel good about themselves and their self-esteem hits, that's the person they'll turn to for support, emotional regulation, and also may even cheat on with in order to make themselves feel better. I want to make it clear that that person, if they don't have strong boundaries around that, that is not something that is going to be healthy for you. So I think the fact that you are addressing this and you are like, this bothers me, is really healthy. For a lot of people, when you bring this up to them, they may say things like, oh yeah, I'll get rid of them, I'll delete them. They won't. Many avoidant attachers, as many people will know, are bad at closure. And I don't just mean the act of telling you that it's over. I mean the act of actually finishing off and leaving the relationship or situationship that you're in, because many of them don't want to leave you. They just want space from you and they want distance from you. Is it an excuse for their behavior? Hell no. Is it an excuse for how they sort of keep, you at arm's length through social media, watch your stories all the time, but don't actually engage with you? Absolutely not. But the point simply is to say that if you are in an uncomfortable situation where they've put another person between you and them as a way to prevent further intimacy from growing, I gotta tell you, that is an elephant in the room waiting to just trample around the dining room. And it's important to make sure that, like I said, you have very good boundaries around the elephant before it does major property damage and you're left rebuilding a home, as well as trying to figure out what the hell happened in your relationship. I know I took that analogy a bit too far, but we're gonna run with it. Anyways, the other thing that I also want to say to this too, and this is just a general thing, with avoidant attachers who come back to you, you need to understand that if they aren't in therapy and also working on their avoidant attachment, which is bloody hard to work on, please understand that it's likely to restart a cycle once intimacy develops and also it's important to understand that if you go through the same cycle of dating this person, that fear of intimacy and commitment may likely resurface and they will restart the cycle again. A lot of these trauma responses, triggers, deactivation strategies are very entrenched for these people. And so they need a lot of time to work through this in order to not run when things become extremely uncomfortable for them. And out of compassion to a lot of avoidant attachers, I recognize how bloody hard this is, because it's really, really difficult to navigate avoidant attachment or even anxious attachment at its most severe state as well too. So ideally, you both want to be coming back together and starting from a place where you feel like you can actually rebuild not only slowly, but also from a place where you feel as though you're not the same people anymore. This is also another really important thing, which I'll say just to wrap this question up, is a lot of avoidant attachers, as many of you will know, love to rush intimacy and connection and are very good at love bombing people, because their innate desire for chemistry, connection, and closeness is something which causes them to race headfirst into a lot of these situations. But also that fear and anxiety of closeness, intimacy, and connection can be a thing which causes them to run, as many of you know. So please bear in mind that if you are going for round 2 with one of these people and they say, yeah, that's fine, we'll take things slow, there is a high tendency for them to push hard and want to interact with you, go for closeness, go to family dinners, to do all these really personal relationship-related events. And it's so important to have strong, firm boundaries and say, no, I want to start out as friends. Some of these activities feel like we're going into a relationship. And if they don't like it, that is for them to work through. That is not your responsibility. But I understand how hard it is to say no and to push back on these people out of the fear that they may run away, not care about you, not want to be with you. But the reality is it's actually for both of you, not just for yourself. So please bear in mind, it is so important to be very assertive and have very strong boundaries if they've come back around, because this isn't round 1 anymore. This is round 2. They've broken your trust. There is betrayal here, and you don't want to go through that again. And if they don't learn how to behave and also operate at your level, they're not going to feel the discomfort of needing to change and want to work on this. So that's that. Anyways, I am just going to quickly scroll back through some of these questions that I have, because I have a lot now and I am loving the stuff that I'm getting here too, which is fantastic. So thank you very much, guys, for putting this through. I'm going to probably answer some of these a bit quicker now so I can get to all of the other ones. Avoidant partner ghosted, then came back saying he loved me. I said he needed to get some help before we could continue, but he still contacts me every day. Do I need to cut him off? I'm not going to answer that directly, but I'm just going to say, generally speaking, I think if someone is saying, they need to get some help before they continue, but they still contact you every day, there's a lot of ambivalence on that person's part where they aren't really giving you very clear answers as to what's going on. And so I think it's understandable to be feeling not only their confusion, but also being undecided as to how to work through this. All I'm going to say on this is, if you feel that continuing to engage with this person is making you feel worse than good, I'm going to leave that with you, because many avoidant attachers will say, I want to get help, but don't actually act on that. So please bear in mind that if you feel like you're being strung along and this person just wants access to you and isn't even also offering a lot of consistency, I think it might be time to revisit how much access you actually give them. And cutting them off, I will say, I know this is a general thing to everyone. I know that generally speaking, cutting off a lot of these unaware avoidant attachers is wise, but not everyone gets there overnight. Please bear in mind that for some people, they need to go through the rigors of seeing how much they can get out of these situations before they make a decision to cut someone off. I did not get to a place of being able to cut avoidant attachers off from day one. I had to work my way to seeing what I could get out of this and ultimately realizing that for some individuals, unfortunately, no change is coming. And it's simply because, I was also maybe projecting too much hope into these experiences. And for others, it was simply a case where it was just like, this isn't going to work between the two of us. So it's a case by case basis. Next question. Is it normal for a disorganized attached person to disappear for weeks? Yes. Typically, the fearful avoidance or the disorganized attachers are the most flighty of the avoidance between between fearful and dismissive, in that once a dismissive has made their mind to leave, you probably won't hear from them for a bit. But a disorganized or a fearful avoidant has a far greater tendency of being in and out, just a bit like Katy Perry's song Hot and Cold. But it's one of those cases where for a lot of avoidant attachers who have that fearful avoidance, there is a tendency for them to have huge gaps of time away from you, come back to the relationship like a yo-yo, and it's usually going to get worse before it gets better. So even though it's normal, I just want to repeat again, not an excuse for the impact it has on you, and you also have to know your own limits and boundaries around this. Avoidant attacher boyfriend has ADHD and depressed, broke up with me last week and asked yesterday, he said he is depressed and asked to start again. Any tips? I feel like, similar to one of the questions I gave a very lengthy essay to, I'm just going to shorten my answer down and say, look, I'm sorry that your partner is experiencing depression and ADHD, neither of which, together is a particularly fun combination and also can be worked on. And also coupled with that too, I also understand that for a lot of us, we have a lot of empathy for avoidant attachers. I do not want people to lose their empathy. I think with this sort of thing too, again, similar to the previous person who asked a similar question, you have to also ask yourself, how much of this am I willing to put up with and also to work through? And does this person also want to respect what didn't go right with the previous time we tried this? And also to see if there's ways that we can make this work differently from last time as well too. Because at the end of the day, even though this person has depression and ADHD, in addition to their avoidant attachment, their willingness to want to work on themselves rather than use their mental health as an excuse will be a sign of how much you can actually work through this. But I have to also put a bit of a blanket statement out here, which is a bit of a harsh truth. Sometimes these people don't often want to, actually commit and work on this sort of stuff. And the unfortunate truth is that at times it's just a sad case of the fact that it doesn't get better. So I just want to say, I am sorry to the people who can't make it work with these people. Others will. And when it works, it's absolutely amazing. But typically round 2 for a lot of these avoidant attachers has to also come with their willingness to sit with the discomfort of being more inclusive with their partner. Next question. Is it common for an avoidant to mischaracterize you setting boundaries as disrespect? Firstly, hell yes. I did an entire video on this where I basically say that boundaries can often be seen as manipulation and control to avoidant attachers, and they can think you're being incredibly needy when in fact you're trying to create respect. They almost always responded with deflection and projection also. Rarely did they initiate conversation. Yeah, that's quite common for a lot of avoidant attachers, unfortunately. A lot of them don't like that form of like non-violent communication. In the beginning of dating, they'll absolutely love it. But when their attachment starts to hit the roof and they start to feel like commitment stepping in, they have to be vulnerable. Absolutely not. They're like, nope, this feels like manipulation and control. Not a fan. Next question. Does a deactivated dismissive avoidant ever come back? Do we pursue them if we go no contact? Ooh, good double question. Dismissive avoidance, typically I find, unlike the fearful avoidance, they can come back, but it's entirely up to them. And it's very 50-50, I find. And it can be down to a whole bunch of different reasons. And the one thing I also want to say is, do you pursue them if you go no contact? Don't recommend it. For the reason that you want this person to realize that they had also made a mistake, and you do that by letting them come up with that conclusion for themselves. If you do want to reach out to them and let them know, hey, I've been thinking about you and trying this again, more power to you, I say. If you want to reach out and something comes off the back of it, I've had clients who've done that and they've been able to reconnect with their partners. But if I'm being completely honest, it's usually gone the same way again and an abrupt breakup has ensued. So with regards to this, it's just unfortunately a case of just sort of letting a lot of these people be and figuring this out for themselves too. And I know that's not an answer that everyone's going to love, but really at the end of the day, there's very little that you can do, or even I would recommend for people in this sort of circumstances, because dismissive avoidance usually are very stubborn when they make a decision up for a lot of this stuff. And I get it. In that moment where they are triggered and they're in the height of their avoidancy, their brain is telling them, run. And so naturally, for many of them, they don't think that renegotiating this is a good idea. Often at times off the back of it though, they often look back with a lot of glossy nostalgia at the experience they had with you without taking any accountability of the nuance and also a lot of the stuff that's theirs that they need to work on. So short answer is they may come back, but chances of it working out again without serious intervention, therapy and willingness on their part, not that great. Next one. Why do avoidants abruptly break up despite having a loving relationship, jump into a new relationship, acts unrecognizable to me, and comes back to me for sex despite knowing how much I love and want them? Oh, many, many good questions. So, okay, I'll try and explain this as best I can. Avoidants abruptly break up with you because typically when they get to a point of feeling like they're shutting down as a consequence of greater intimacy and commitment, where they are then flooded with lots of fears and thoughts and anxiety, things telling them like, this person isn't right for me. I feel like I'm not good enough for this person. This person's going to be disappointed with me. I feel as though maybe they're not the right person for me. Relationships shouldn't feel this hard. This is what causes them to seek out deactivation strategies, one of which is terminating a relationship out of nowhere to try and validate that voice in their head, which is saying, this isn't right for me. When they do this, another deactivation strategy that follows up from that too is seeking a new partner. Not sure if anyone here watched my live that I did with Tyson a few days ago. Tyson is a self-identified dismissive avoidant. He said to me that once he actually ended a relationship, he'd often crave a new one to almost like soothe the loss of the previous one. And that can come down for a variety of different reasons, not only from almost like a drug high, because we have to remember too, there is a bit of a drug component to relationships, which is when, you've had that oxytocin hit and then you're out of it. Your body can then start to crave, wanting another relationship off the back of it too. So there's that bit. But then also, we have to remember too that a lot of them compartmentalize a lot of what they're feeling. When they are feeling a lot of guilt and shame, they may also turn to a new relationship to get over you. They can rationalize and believe, you know what? It looks so much better for me to actually be in a new relationship and look like I've moved on. Many of these people have an ethos of self-sufficiency and toxic independence, where they believe that moving forward with life and not dwelling in the past is the way to go. And you know what? More power to a lot of these individuals. I don't necessarily think it's the healthiest way to go, but this is usually how they operate. And it's never usually about you, unfortunately. And then with regards to acting unrecognizable to you, coming back for sex despite knowing how much you love and want them, usually when they do this, they still want access to you, and sex may be a way of still having access without going any further than that. We have to remember that for a lot of avoidant attachers, they treat sex differently to a lot of people. For them, it's their way sometimes of feeling like they have, a bit of a drug hit from time to time, or they may also feel like, this is their way of feeling better about themselves. It's not always their way of seeing you in the picture with the relationship. But if they are coming back to you and now treating you like friends with benefits, again, I want to explain the nuance of this. It's disrespectful to you, but they're not often trying to disrespect you. They're often doing this as a way to try and manage their own sort of need to want to be with you, but also the fear of not wanting to be too closely with you. So it's a bit of a complex sort of situation. I'm going to I'm going to answer a few more of these questions in my chat, and then I'm going to move to the question box where I can see they have built up. So I'll go through that. Let's see. X abruptly left as I cannot be in a relationship. We were moving slow, but now he's with a new girlfriend. He moved in right after a one-night stand. Hard not to compare. Any advice? I really feel for people who've gone through this. I'm no stranger to having had this happen to me. And I think that there's a couple of things that I want to say here. I'm sorry that you've gone through this because it's an absolutely awful thing to have been in a good feeling situationship or relationship with an avoidant partner only for them to suddenly leave you and go with someone new, because it can make you feel like I'm not good enough. This new person must be better than me. What do they have that I don't have? I feel even worse now as a consequence of this person's behavior. All valid. I would say that one of the best things you can actually do is actually start to not only educate yourself more on avoidant partners as to why they do this, so that way you don't personalize it as much. But deeper to this too is actually a lot of, and this is something, and I can see that, from this user, just for a bit of context, is someone who I believe would identify as a woman. So I just want to say, I know for a lot of women who I've worked with, there is a lot of conditioning and socialization, which is your sense of worth is dependent on what validation you get from a man. That just seems to be a very heteronormative thing that I've seen across for a lot of straight women, which is just really greatly unfair as a consequence of many different factors, including the patriarchy and a whole bunch of different things that have gone on for so long. So I just want to say here that I often find that a lot of my clients who are women or identify as female often find that there is often a lot of feelings of low self-worth where they were groomed in family dynamics where they were made to feel like they had to perform for their fathers or had to perform for men in order to get validation to be told you are good enough. And so naturally, when you've got a guy who is with the girl when you've got the guy who you may feel like is the love of your life dating someone new, it can be very hard not to personalize a lot of that. And a lot of that stuff can be coming from a place of deep-rooted shame that's still in you that needs to be resolved too. And I don't want this to seem like, this is just something that you need to work on. It's just to say that down the line, it is good to consider perhaps speaking to a specialist where you can do a lot of that inner child work to work through a lot of that, because that can cut you to the core. For now though, because I feel like that's a step too far down the line, I would say simply this. I think getting some education on this is really important. Secondly, I would also reduce any contact that you have with both of them by way of not actually interacting with them on social media, because it's going to drive you insane. One day down the road, you'll be able to unpack this and also work through a lot of that stuff for yourself. Today is probably not the day to do that. Moving on to the question box. Okay, is it normal when this person, this avoidant attacher, deletes my number and follows me on social media? It can be. I mean, for some avoidant attachers, when they abruptly break up with you, they may do an extreme thing of just abruptly blocking you on everything and just deleting everything. Please understand that when they do this, it's like usually out of a very extreme emotion. And it's not because they hate you or they don't like you or they never want to see you again. It's because they're usually quite scared and uncomfortable with how they feel around you. And they think it's for the best to do that. And they often have a lot of regret for doing that. And it's not an excuse for their behavior, but unfortunately this can be one route that a lot of avoidant attachers take. For the average human being, I find to block someone, you really have to have gotten to a stage where you're like, I don't want to be interacting with this individual anymore, goodbye. So to do that, you really have to have gotten to a place of being like, fuck this, I don't want to interact with this individual anymore. This isn't fun. And something that I often tell my clients is that, to block someone typically is a last resort. For someone to have done that, they really have to be quite wound up emotionally, but it doesn't mean you've done anything to cause that. It could be for them that they just feel so out of control and they don't like feeling these emotions, and this is the way they rationalize being the best way to just eliminate that altogether. Next question. Rand the Rising Phoenix, great username, asks, is it possible for an avoidant guy to friend zone you even though they have feelings for you? first, I'm just going to answer that part of the overall few questions. Yes, because my guy did that. I feel very led on and I'm very hurt, even though we never dated. It feels like a breakup. Okay, this one goes out to all the people who have got avoidant friends in their social circle who actually may have feelings for you that could be quite romantic. And for people who have been in situationships with avoidant attachers where they've friend zoned you, even though you feel like there's something potentially going on beneath the surface, which they never really, develop with you. I want to just say that these kind of experiences can be equal to, if not more painful sometimes than the full-fledged, dating experiences, because you always feel like you're being shut out, and you also feel like, this person is just using the friend label as a way to mitigate and manage their own fears of intimacy and commitment. Terrible experience to go through. I'm no stranger to having gone through this myself too. And I think that in terms of, how you're feeling, being led on, feeling very hurt, totally valid. So please understand this is very common for a lot of avoidant attachers to do, and they will often do this to others to make them feel, in control of a situation. Just going to take a quick pause here just to once again shamelessly advertise that my course Heartbreak Grief Relief drops tomorrow. To anyone who is going through a tough breakup or even situationship breakup off the back of dating an avoidant attacher, it's currently at 50% off before I release it for full price tomorrow. So if you want to jump in and grab that, please click the link in my bio to go and purchase that. It'd mean a lot to me because obviously I like creating content around this sort of stuff. And also, if you feel it would be of help to you in your journey, that would be amazing. And all the disclaimers are littered throughout my social media on what it involves and what it includes. Hell, you can even DM me to ask me what you might be wondering about, what it offers and stuff, and I'm happy to answer that. Moving on. Next question is there a way to actually gain trust when you don't have bad intentions? Okay, I'm not sure how to answer that. So, is there a way to gain trust when you don't have bad intentions? I'm going to assume that this is being phrased as generally. So, in terms of gaining trust, that's a bit of an exercise which is done slowly with individuals, I find. And when it comes to, this isn't more of an avoidant thing, I think. A lot of avoidant attachers don't obviously have bad intentions, though their actions may speak otherwise. And I just want to say, I think going slow with someone and also taking the opportunity to actually demonstrate consistency and also alignment is a way to build that trust. And if someone behaves in a way which is deeply painful, that also may be construed as having bad intentions, for example, cheating, abruptly breaking up with you, sexting, I think the thing for the avoidant attacher is to realize that even though that action may not have had bad intentions, the impact is what matters. And it's so important to take accountability for that and go, babe, I'm sorry that I've done this. I didn't mean to do this to you. I want to work on this to help our relationship. So that's how I'd navigate that one. Next question is, what if you sent an email expressing your feelings and concerns for them moving on with someone? Did it damage a chance of reconciliation? It can. So I think it's wonderful that you actually wanted to do this, because I think it's really good to hold these people accountable for their behavior, because even if they don't necessarily change off the back of it, enough feedback can often be the motivator for these people to be like, I have a problem. I need to change. So please, please, please hold a lot of avoidant attachers accountable to their behavior, because this is the next part that I want to answer. It may not be something that brings you closer together, unfortunately, because a lot of avoidant attachers can be very hypercritical, unfortunately, and don't want to take accountability. So please understand, it may not bring you closer, but calling them out on it is actually really good, not only for yourself, but actually for them in the future, because they need that feedback for themselves. Next question is, things to keep in mind to successfully co-parent with a dismissive avoidant. Thanks, I love your work. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. I have to be completely honest here. I'm not a co-parenting expert, and that question would probably be better answered by someone who has got experience with that. I know one of my colleagues, Tawny Lovelace, she does a lot of work around co-parenting and how to navigate that, and I would probably recommend checking out her. But I guess something to bear in mind, it's not too dissimilar from co-parenting with narcs. The difference being that with avoidant attachers, obviously you don't have to deal with like the same level of abuse, which is great. I'd say that the thing to bear in mind is have very low expectations. make sure that you also don't expect this person to come back loving you or being able to have a fully fledged relationship. You may actually find that the space between the two of you actually allows you to communicate a bit more readily. But I think that you have to also bear in mind that a lot of these people aren't built for, family and also long-term relationships, and they can treat it like, they can feel like it's obligation for a lot of them, and they don't like feeling like trapped into that. So bear in mind their capacity to be a good parent could actually be quite impaired by their trauma and also their own history. I want to take a moment here to say, I haven't done this content much yet, but I'm really keen. Avoidant parents can be extremely damaging to their children. And I also want to take a pause here to say too, severely anxious parents can also be pretty bad too, but that's a whole different kettle of fish that I'll deal with one day down the road. But I want to take a moment here to address when an avoidant parent is unable to protect their child and also to be present emotionally for their child, that can cause severe abandonment wounds for their child and also a lot of emotional neglect. Many avoidant traded people have serious issues with addiction and often find themselves being in these quite codependent sort of experiences, often sometimes with very narcissistic partners as well. So it's very important to understand the lay of the land, which is for these people, if they haven't navigated their trauma and also wanting to take accountability and actually be more expressive and emotional to their child, they can also make their child feel incredible loss, longing, and also deep pain off the back of what they've been through, which is horrific. Next question. What is an avoidant thinking when they abruptly break up with you longer term after 1.5 years and then doesn't acknowledge your presence in person? Yes, this is something that a lot of people go through. It's one of many variations of what can happen off the back of this. There's a lot that they can be thinking about, and it depends from person to person. Some of the things that they might be thinking in this particular case could include things like, this person's better off without me, or I think that it would be too hard to be with someone like this, so I'm just going to disappoint them in the end. So they may be going through a lot of rationalizations as to why it'd be better not to be with you. And whether or not that's actually true in reality, they believe it to be true. And then in terms of not acknowledging your presence in person, that indicates to me that they are not comfortable around you, which again, it does not mean you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but for them, they just may feel like they don't feel safe being around you, maybe because of what they've done, and they feel a lot of guilt and shame. But I usually find the dominant emotion is fear. And also I think being close to you probably means they don't feel like they can actually be safe around you. So they choose to be very, let's just say, cavalier and also very distant. And it's just shit when you go through that. So I'm sorry that you're going through that. Again, not an excuse for their behavior. Unfortunately, it's just one of the many ways in which they may treat you off the back of a breakup, and it can be terrible. The other extreme, which I talked about the other day, is acting like they still love you, and also a day never went by when you were at the height of your relationship. So these experiences can be very hyper or hypo, where they can either treat you with complete indifference or treat you like, you're at the height of your dating again. Next question is, my avoidant partner got into a relationship immediately after ending with me. I'm very hurt. I'm sorry that they've gone and done that, because I can imagine that would deeply hurt you. I know many people who have counseled, who've had actually really triggering experiences seeing their ex dating someone new, and it's horrific. So I just want to say, very common that it happens, not an excuse that it occurs, and I'm deeply sorry that you feel as though maybe this person, the one that got away, has gone and done this to you in spite of the shared time that you had together, because it is unfortunately very common and it's a terrible thing to go through. Okay, next question. Avoidant attachment versus relationship ambivalence. How to know if ex was just on the fence with you or avoidantly attached? Oh, this is such a great question, because this is actually something that anxiously attached people can also suffer from as well too, because insecure attachment can make it hard to discern if something's right for you or not. Okay, so I'm going to take this two ways. Avoidant attachments, when they're in dating and relationships, are highly ambivalent at the best of times, particularly those with more severe avoidant attachment. So I would say that avoidant attachers' signs of ambivalence will manifest before you even know about it. They'll tell you things upon the abrupt breakup, saying things like, yeah, I just felt like for a while, or like the last couple of months, this feeling of not being right with you, even if they've known you for years, or even if you've dated substantially for a few months. And the clear sign that this is starting to manifest is when they distance themselves from you and you feel it. Usually this can come off the back of like a holiday, a shared time together that was quite romantic, you spending a lot of, intense conversation with this person, they can just start to back away and you'll feel it. And that's a telltale sign of avoidant attachment. But someone with anxious attachment who may be entering into a secure relationship and also is not used to being with someone who's that secure, is they can start to actually nitpick the person and become incredibly degrading towards that person because they're so worried that this individual is actually going to, is going to freak them out somehow. And so what the tendency here is for a lot of people who have that more anxious love addict style is they can make the right person wrong by degrading them in their head. And unlike an avoidant attacher, they'll usually start just being a bit passive aggressive and just sort of like a bit critical of the person. And it comes out very overtly. And it's usually that person's telltale sign of knowing that this anxious attacher is not used to this level of security. And they're trying essentially to bomb test someone who's probably reasonably healthy, but they're worried about it going wrong. And so often I find anxiety is a core factor for even the avoidant and the anxious attacher in this because they're both not used to someone who's more of a secure base. But even secure bases aside, I think relationship ambivalence is quite common no matter how you're attached. And I think previous relationship experiences can contribute to this. So I hope that my answer sort of illustrates that it can show up in different ways, but a better way of illustrating it and dealing with it is to communicate these anxieties and fears to your partner, of which, unfortunately, avoidant attachers don't often do a great job of. And even severely anxious people, I gotta tell you, can sometimes bugger it up too because they are so damn worried about being hurt, which I get. Next question is, when does the course go up to? I enrolled right away, but I have been working on what I want to post to let my followers. I feel like that's a half a question there. So I'm going to answer the first part. The course officially is launched tomorrow, and by course I mean Heartbreak Grief Relief, which is my 4-week self-paced course. You can do it as quickly or as long as you like. And it officially launches tomorrow at 99 Australian dollars, or 99.99 Australian dollars to be precise. I'm currently giving it away as a pre-sale at 50 Australian dollars. So that's launching tomorrow. Feel free to please go ahead and purchase that, or pre-purchase it, I should say, before I release it tomorrow, as I'm very excited to release it to those of you who are going through a bad breakup and do want a bit of support off the back of that, because it's I'm no stranger to bad breakups, and particularly ones with avoidant attachers are awful. So I think the purpose of this course is really to give you a bit of structure to know, like, okay, how do I navigate the first few months when I'm going through the first stage of grief, which is that confusion, that disbelief, to help you get to a place where you're like, I think I'm ready to move on now. Just want to remind everyone, this is not a heartbreak cure. This is not a, how do I move on from my ex? Many people are not ready to move on from their ex just yet. So this is just a way of helping you to feel more supported in your journey, and also to help you manage your triggers, and also to manage, you know, the pedestal that you might still have this person on. So that way you can start to deassemble it and also feel like, okay, I can recognize this person for who they are, and I don't feel like I can take this I don't need to take so much responsibility for this person's behavior. Next question. Why do avoidants like to spend their time with friends and family separately from you, never invite you to join? A lot of it's their fears of intimacy and commitment. They don't want to necessarily have you included. They don't want to be included in your life. They want things to be on their terms. Common sign is they often want to hang out with their friends, their family. They'll invite you to join their crowd, but the minute some of them feel like they're entering into your space with your crowd, your friends, your family, that can cause them to feel triggered and a sense of loss of control, and also cause them to feel like, oh God, this is too much, I'm feeling enmeshed. So it's important to understand that a lot of this is done to help them feel safe. Once again, not an excuse for how it makes you feel unincluded, not together in your situationship or relationship with them. And last question I currently have in my question box before I refresh it is, I've answered that one already. So I might just refresh this now and see what else I've got here too. Let's see. How do you tell someone you love you think they're an avoidant? Oh, the $1 million question. You hand them a copy of Attached and get them to fill out a attachment quiz. No, I'm joking. That actually is a very soft way of doing that. But I guess on that note, if we want to talk about the most sly but cute way of doing it, is you can actually say, hey babe, I've been really reflecting on how I want to, improve myself in our relationship. And one thing that I've actually come to awareness of is actually attachment styles. And I was thinking, this actually seems to account for a lot of my behavior and is helping me to better understand how I shop. I was curious if you'd be open to maybe just like taking a look at this too, because you might find it really fascinating, what comes up for you. I want to just take a moment here to say a lot of avoidant attachers are very bad at actually identifying how they are on attachment quizzes. The number of times I've had avoidant clients come up to me being like, I'm securely attached. And I'm like, no, you're not, is quite high. So please bear in mind that this little act, which is kind of cute and not forced, may not give you the answer that you're looking for, even if you know better. Because many avoidant attachers don't want to admit that they actually have a problem. And, I get it. Denial is a very big thing for a lot of people with avoidant attachment. So please bear in mind that's one route. But if you want to do it the most direct way, I find that a really good opportunity to do this is when they're starting to distance themselves or be passive aggressive and rude to you when they're trying to like create space or even abruptly end things. A thing you can actually do is you can say to them, babe, I love you. I just want to let you know that I'm feeling like a lot of what I'm getting is actually avoidance, and also that there's also maybe even a fear of intimacy between us. I love and respect you. I just want to give that back to you. Because by doing that, you're saying, I'm not going to take ownership for the way in which I'm being treated. Some of them will actually respond reasonably well to that and be like, wait, what? That's the thing that I'm doing? And then they may actually reflect on it, but others may not. And so it's not a silver bullet. It's very hard to sometimes address this with people in order to help them understand how they're showing up in their dating and relationships. So it's a tricky thing for a lot of this. The analogy that I often use, and I can say this as a gay man, is it's like someone who is still identifying their sexuality, but they're also in the closet. You going out saying you're bisexual, you're a lesbian, you're gay, before that person is ready, may push them further into the closet rather than acknowledging, actually, you're right. This is something that's a part of me that I want to explore and address. So please bear in mind that for many people, they don't often want to feel the responsibility of something that they have that could be contributing to things that they're afraid to admit to, which I know doesn't really help a lot of people, but unfortunately that's just the world we live in. Next question. Ooh, good question here. Is there even if a little difference between avoidant male and female? Yeah, there can be. I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe this because I don't want to turn this into stereotypes. I suppose a classic example of an avoidant attached male versus an avoidant attached female would be, I feel like the avoidant male could be like, there's two sort of extremes that I'm thinking of. The dismissive avoidant, if I had to sort of paint a picture, is sort of like your lawyer, very like corporate, or your doctor who is like very well put together, cavalier, charming, and please don't think narcissist when I'm saying this. Just think someone who's reasonably put together, charming, down to earth, and just not very expressive. Maybe they're fun, they're funny, they're very intelligent and witty, but I would say that for the men that I'm portraying this as, they're very sort of like outwardly appearing very secure, inwardly very insecure. For the female that's like this, I would say you could even use a similar lens. And I feel like there's almost like this image of austerity, like kind of like Robin Wright when she was playing the wife in House of Cards, like almost like marble and just sort of very, austere and also put together, but deep down probably carries a lot of trauma. So that can be a thing. And then I also think too, another way of illustrating it is, this is where I feel like the big distinctions can come in. I feel like one thing I often get from a lot of my clients who are straight men dating avoidant women is this description of avoidant women as being effervescent, almost like childlike and innocent, and also very flighty. And then for the women dating avoidant men, there can be this feeling of like immaturity, like dating sort of like my teenage dream guy. And it's sort of like this young, youthful, emotional Peter Pan sort of energy. So I hope that sort of illustrates how that can appear. In terms of how it shows up in behavior, I can't really give more like descriptors to that because I feel like that goes into very specific categories and I can't think of any off the top of my head. Let's see, what else have I got here? I believe that I may have answered everything here. Will this entire video be available later? Please make it so, thanks. Absolutely, it is going to be a video, so have no fear about that. Next question. I think I haven't answered this one. He broke up with me on text after almost 2 years, then ghosted me. I tried to reach out a few times a week after the breakup for closure. I was ghosted even though they promised they'd never do that. Do you think they'd reach out again? Honestly, I'm not a prophet. It's 50-50. Some of them will, some of them won't. I think that some don't want to do that because they don't want to go back there because they feel like, yeah, no thanks, don't want to necessarily go back around to that. So they may they may rationalize and be like, it's for the right, I'm making the right choice not to do this. A lot of avoidant attachers unfortunately do this. You may tell them, please don't never leave me, please don't ghost me, don't ever treat me like this, and they will. And it's not because they're trying to fuck with you or they're trying to intentionally do something to hurt you, but often this is the way they think, it's like, oh, this is for the best for the situation, or they think like, they're doing you a favor. And that rationalization is based a lot of in fear and logic, not based on like, how could this really hurt this person that I'm treating? So please bear in mind that a lot of the time that this decision-making it's convoluted in its design, but it is one of those things where it can be deeply painful for the recipient. In terms of do I ever think they'll reach out again, I have to give a disappointing answer of maybe, but I can't tell. Some of them do after a long time, some of them won't. So it's just shit because a lot of it's out of your control. Let's take a look. Let's see. Have I answered any of these? Oh, what determines if a person is going to develop anxious versus avoidant adaptations in response to relational trauma? Based on all the research that I've done, it seems to be a choice made very early on in childhood based on the environment that they've grown up in. I think a lot of it's quite adaptive, like in the sense that we all have the capacity to have avoidant behavior and anxious tendencies. Like we're no stranger to that. Even the most secure person, when with someone who's got a lot of insecure attachment, can swing wildly to anxious or wildly to avoidant based on the partner that they're with. But I think it's really a case of if someone's in a prolonged environment that's maladaptive, someone is maybe more likely to make the choice to be like, you know what, I'm just going to do whatever mummy or daddy tells me, or I'm just not going to be that reactive like my sibling. And so it really, I think, depends on the choices the child makes in response to that sort of development. But I want to be clear, when I say choice, I don't mean like this is some child who's, how do I put it? I don't want to make it seem like there was like, a choice to be like, this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I think a lot of this boils down to subconscious sort of adaptive mechanisms put in place in childhood to survive a shitty environment that they may have been in, or even simply a neglectful environment depending on the circumstances. So I believe that is all the questions that I have answered in there. So I'm just going to quickly just skim through a lot of the remaining things that are part of this chat. By the way, I just want to say to everyone, thank you very much for being part of this conversation today, because this is very spontaneous, and I also wanted to do this to promote my course, which, by the way, you can pre-purchase before I launch it tomorrow at $50 Australian dollars. And I thought I'd just quickly now go through some of the remaining questions I can see as part of the chat. So, got another question here, which is, what if you sent the letter to your ex explaining your feelings and sharing how they behaved, maybe messing around with someone? Did I ruin the chance? Oh wait, no, I think I've answered that question. Short answer is yes, that could possibly impact that. Okay, next question is, I feel like I am the other person he comes to for emotional validation, and that's not what I want. He avoided me, and now I feel like I'm being used for his emotional validation or whatever he wants. That actually is very common. Many avoidant attachers may emotionally dump on you and use you as their therapist in a way to deal with how they're feeling. And funnily enough, this is often how they were treated by their parents, who emotionally dumped on them and also were inappropriate with boundaries. So if that's going on, be aware of it. How you decide to deal with that is entirely up to you, but please be mindful that it's not okay behavior to go through that. How to differentiate someone who is just not that into you with a dismissive avoidant. I'm assuming as in like, how do I know if a dismissive avoidant isn't into you, or someone who genuinely isn't that into you versus someone who's a dismissive avoidant? So I'm going to answer this both ways. If someone is a dismissive avoidant and they're not that into you and they haven't worked through their trauma, they will probably last a very long time in that relationship with you, because then they don't have to be intimate and vulnerable with you in expressing how they feel. Many common pairings in the world today are actually between dismissive avoidance and someone who is quite neurotic and anxious, maybe even narcissistic, because for the avoidant partner in that role, they get to be independent without having to explore their feelings with that other person. So the person who's more like wild, out of control, that means they can feel like independent, safe, secure, sturdy, and they don't have to truly bond with that person. And it's important to realize that for many avoidant attachers, they seek this as a way to help, well, not consciously, but they subconsciously seek this as a way to help them feel safe in a relationship. So this can be an experience where a lot of dismissive avoidants choose partners because they're not genuinely that emotionally into that particular person. And they may have had other people that they passed on who they felt like that it was going to just expose them in a way where they'd have to be vulnerable, and they didn't want to do that. Now, a person who's genuinely not that into you, I'm no stranger to this, and I'm sure many people have had this experience too. A person who is genuinely not that into you is not someone who has feelings for you ever. They may think you're a nice person. You may tick all the boxes. Many anxious attachers who also have symptoms of love addiction generally fall in this category, where they'll date someone where it's like, hey, I genuinely, like this individual. They're a nice person. I just have no feelings for them whatsoever. They're highly compatible, zero chemistry or connection going on. That is a case of someone who's just not into that individual with all the compatibility and green flags ticked. It's just an unfortunate case of we're just not that into that person. If we were, fantastic. Does it mean it's trauma related? Who knows? But the point is, you're just not into that person. So just thought I'd provide that nuance and discernment there, because it can get tricky to understand that if you haven't gone through it, or if you have, you may have thought it was something else. So that can be something going on. Let's see, what else have I got here? Ooh, okay. Can I explain the disgust towards partner in fearful avoidance? Absolutely, I can. So fearful avoidance, like I was saying earlier, operate differently to dismissives. Fearful avoidants are very flighty in their situationships and relationships, meaning they have a tendency, if you've moved in with one of them, to abruptly leave and then go back to their place and then come back to you after 30 days and do the cycle again. And they know that often at times there's something not quite right. They also have a characteristic of starting fights like a severe anxious would, to try and, it's a weird thing. They do it because they feel insecure with the person that they're with, but also they do it to create a scenario where they can feel like they've actually got some control with the chaos going on around them. But, and I've worked with some fearful avoidants on this, once you work through the anxious part of the avoidant, they start to feel like they can actually self-soothe and they can reliably work through their anxious tendencies, then the avoidance side rears its head. And because their bodies are not used to safety, like clockwork, I usually find with some avoidant attachers, it's always the same time, maybe the 4th day, the 5th week, their body activates into a state of I can't do this, I don't like being here, I need to leave, I need to get out, I need to go to my apartment straight away, I never come back. And that's their avoidancy coming out. When that happens, that can be manifested as disgust, where they'll look at their partner and just be like, ew. A really good example that I can share that I actually had from someone that I spoke to was they said, I looked at my partner, I looked at the way they were eating, and I felt disgust because it took me back to the way in which my parent used to shame me for my body and also for how I ate. They put me on these restrictive diets. And it also brought up another thought, which is I don't want to be with someone who has health issues. When my father passed away from high cholesterol, it felt like such a huge loss to me. And the thought of having a partner who can't even handle their own health and well-being is something that I cannot tolerate. So a lot of multiple things can coexist in this, including fears of abandonment, also not wanting to feel difficult emotions, also feeling projected shame onto their partner. And that can include a feeling of ew, I don't want to be here with my partner right now. So I hope that makes a bit of sense for how fearful avoidant disgust can come out for some people. Next question. How do you regain love for your partner after years of subconsciously using deactivating techniques such as I won't commit to her long term. I'm going to assume this is actually written by someone who has avoidant attachment. So if you're someone who has had a history of deactivation with someone that you've dated, I think the trick is, like we would say to any couple in couples counseling, is go back to what you liked about this person. Before all of these deactivation strategies kicked in to help protect you from a seemingly unsafe experience with this person, what did you like about this person? What did you fall in love with them, even from a superficial level? How did they make you feel when they were engaging with you too? It's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's one of those things where going back to the basics can be a way to rebuild that. And for an avoidant attacher, it might be harder because obviously their brain, when they're activated, might be like, I can't do this, I need to run, this person's not right for me. But you have to remember too, and this is something I always tell my avoidant clients, your avoidancy is lying to you. It's trying to keep you safe. That avoidant attachment speaks loudly and the height of its anxiety. So please bear in mind that a lot of that noise that you're hearing, whilst loud and may also feel like it's the right thing to do, may also be misleading you from time to time. So it's good to actually identify that. Internal family systems therapy is a great way for working through a lot of that. I've had a lot of success with that with my avoidant clients. Highly recommend it to those of you interested. Let's check it out. What to do when your partner is getting the ick? That's an unfortunate situation of it. That's unfortunately their stuff to work through. That's just crap. Like, I mean, it's really shitty when they do that and they're not recognizing where that comes from. Generally, I find if I get the ick from someone, it's usually a superficial thing, and that's for me to work through. Now, whether or not that actually influences my involvement with someone that I'm dating is a matter of discernment. But if your partner's getting the ick, let them. It's just unfortunate. And it's a case of them being like, they have to sit through that crap themselves. It does not feel good to be on the receiving end of that ick. So I would say, if you need to journal and process that or speak to a professional about it, fair. But I also want to say, there's not much you can do unless they bring to your awareness, like how that, you might be contributing to that. But even then, I wouldn't want to be putting up with a lot of that stuff too, because it's a pretty awful thing to go through. Let's see. What else have we got? How do you spot an avoidant attachment style early? They need to wear a badge, and they need to say, I have avoidant attachment, and you need to assess whether that's something you want to work with or not, whether you have your secure anxious badge. I'm being silly. In terms of avoidant attachment style and identifying it early, I think one of the earliest things you can do is actually ask them questions like, hey, I'd love to know, how was your relationship experience? What have you learned from dating? And typically I find for avoidant attachers, and this is sort of the general answers I usually get from them when I've dated men with avoidant attachment, is they'll describe their dating and relationship history in sort of vague terms like, they just weren't that compatible with me. I've had a lot of partners who I just wasn't really in love with. Or I feel like my last partner, they just cheated on me. Now I want to say, to the last example, no one likes being cheated on. Duh. It's a pretty painful experience to go through. We also have to unpack that a little bit more and go, but why did that cheating occur? Did it occur in a vacuum? Because usually there's a lot of underlying reasons as to sometimes why someone cheats. Not always from a place of maliciousness. It's important to understand, it's like, okay, so what do you think contributed to that? What was your responsibility in the relationship that led up to the cheating too? If they dated someone who was narcissistic, well, that's a different story altogether. But if they were dating someone where they were so fed up with their partner for not giving them validation that they turned to someone else and they cheated on their avoidant partner, that can happen. It's one of those things where cheating, has many layers to it, and not every scenario is the same. So when you ask those questions, being like, okay, tell me why you didn't feel you were compatible, you may find they have very intellectualized rationalizations like, oh yeah, we just like different things. Oh, they liked skiing and I liked hiking. Oh, I just felt as though, we were operating from different places at the time. Oh, I just felt as though, they weren't as healed as me. So it becomes sort of just like excuses rather than actual compatibility reasons. Real compatibility issues are, we were having a known issue for a very long time. We tried working on it, and it got to a point where we tried and tried and tried and we couldn't make it work. And now we're at a point where we had to move on. that is something that you can bring to the table and you can really unpack and be like, here's my part to play in this. This is the other person's part to play in it. That's how I would ask questions like that to find out how this person is able to reflect. Avoidant attachers not great at reflecting on the past, much better at projecting ahead into the future and just going ahead, barreling forward without wanting to really dig up things from their own Pandora's box, so to speak. Next question. Broke up with an avoidant because I needed more from them. He said he needed more time. I left and wished him well. It's been 2 weeks. Should you reach out? That's a really individual question for everyone. I mean, if you're the one who's broken up with your avoidant partner, that still can be quite painful. I'm going to speak for myself. I wouldn't. I would just be like, nah, just let them sit with the discomfort of what's happened. But I don't know your situation. I don't know what you've been through, and I don't know this person that you've been with and their ability to actually act on that change. So I'd say it's an individual choice for you if you want to do that. But I think it's important to understand that it's really unfortunate that that's the case of where things are at in terms of that situation. And I'm sorry that you've gone through that, because I know for the people who've had to leave their avoidant partners, they did not do that from a place of usually of willingness. A lot of them did it because they were like, I am not getting my needs met here and I have to do this for myself. And it is a bloody painful thing for many of them to do. So my heart goes out to those of you who've had to do that. I'm no stranger. I've done that myself. Not fun. But at the end of the day, it can feel like you're biting your own leg off to save yourself. So it's a pretty awful experience. Next question. After 4 miscarriages, avoidant husband left me and within a week got a new girlfriend, emails me and tells me he doesn't love me and never will again. Should I expect his new relationship to last? Well, firstly, on behalf of everyone here, I'm about to swear, fuck them for the way in which they behaved in that particular situation, because not okay to do that to anyone. I mean, again, granted, they're valid to have their own reasons for wanting to do what they did, but you know, that kind of behavior is not okay on any basis to do that to someone. And I'm really sorry that you've gone through that, because that's not okay to have been treated in that particular way, especially in relation to that particular incident. So, do I expect their new relationship to last? No idea. I mean, going back to what I'd said earlier, if they were with someone who, you know, is safe for them, but doesn't make them feel like they have to be vulnerable, maybe. If it's someone where they have to eventually bond and be vulnerable with that person, probably not. I do think one thing that's quite telling is the fact that they, like, just the vitriol that I'm getting from this person, telling you after you've had serious miscarriages and also probably a whole host of other things going on behind the scenes, that they don't love you and they never will again. That's extreme hate being thrown at you right there. Like, I mean, I gotta tell you, that person is not a happy person when they left you. And it doesn't mean they don't care about you. I think it's really an example of splitting, which is something we see a lot in people with avoidant attachment, where you're either all good or all bad from one minute to the next, depending on how they're feeling about you. Yes, splitting can occur with people who have borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, but we have to remember that people who have avoidant attachment often don't have the most developed emotional maturity. So as a consequence, it can be very binary from time to time in those sort of cases. Again, sorry that you've gone through that. And look, privately, and I'm sure many people would probably agree with this, chances of that lasting, that new relationship, not that high. But I also don't want to give you false hope and expectation with that. So I just want to say, you know, generally speaking, who knows? I don't know how it'll go, but I can understand if you probably feel quite hurt off the back of that too, because a lot of people would. Next one. He said he's emotionally attached and feels committed to me, but is not ready for a relationship. So we stopped seeing each other, but now he's with someone he wants to be all in, confused. Okay, I'm going to assume that this person's avoidantly attached for just the sake of the question. If they're avoidantly attached and said they're ready for a relationship but then got with someone new, I have actually had a few clients who've gone through that experience, and it's kind of gone this way. The person that they're dating has been like, absolutely, I want to just jump into this relationship with you. I'm super keen. I'm ready. I'm involved. And then next minute, they found someone new being like, oh, I met this person at a rave who I've fallen in love with. The connection is amazing. And I think it's best if I tell you now because I want to move to be with this new person. If this individual did this and they have avoidant attachment, that new person is someone who is essentially helping them to avoid intimacy and commitment with you. to do like to have gotten so uncomfortable, and this unfortunately has happened to many of my clients, to have had a situation like that where you suddenly give up the person you've been dating to be with someone you just met at a situation like that. Like, I mean, I understand the whole thing of like, well, you know, maybe you just meet someone who you click with, and when you know, but why would you throw away someone like that? Like, I think that really shows a lack of the ability to actually discern and tell that person like, okay, you know, maybe I'm scared of the idea of actually being committed to you. We also have to remember too, a lot of avoidant attachers love the honeymoon phase and the chemistry of meeting someone new. If they've been getting to know you for a little while and things were slowly progressing towards intimacy and commitment, the chance of being with someone new where the connection felt great would of course be, you know, too hard of an opportunity to miss up. So I reckon that for them, it could be very much a case of just being like, I'll take the candy that's available to me that makes me feel good versus the one that I've been chewing on for a while and I've lost interest in because now I have to actually commit to the full thing. So just want to say, very common behavior for an avoidant attacher, and I'm sorry that you've gone through that because it's not a fun experience to go through. And let's take a look. What else have I got here? On average, how long does it take to get over getting dumped, blocked after they said I was the one? Been 4 months and it still feels like yesterday at times. Okay, real talk. Long time for a lot of people. It is going to take a long time to heal off the back of an abrupt breakup with an avoidant attacher. There is just no second way around it. For many people who've gone through this a few times and have been able to work through it, like I can do this now quite easily and I don't get as affected by it. Not that I recommend people get to this stage in the sense that you don't want to go through multiple breakups with avoidant attachers. One thing I want to make it very clear is when you have a bad breakup, regardless of who you are, you also have to remember that you will be reactivated into feeling some of prior betrayal, abandonment, hurt that you may not have processed originally. And all that stuff comes flooding out of you, coupled with potential other feelings of like depression, not necessarily disordered depression, maybe, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Anxiety, suicidal ideation. Many people feel like they lost their reason to live. And it's very common for people to feel like they lost a lot of happiness in the process. These experiences are deeply traumatic and can take some people decades to heal from. Not everyone's the same. Some people will heal from it quicker than others, but please normalize the fact that this is a excruciating experience to go through, and any added mental health, trauma, or disorder experience that you are personally going through will be extra baggage on top of that too. And it's not helped if you're in a bad workplace situation, you're not loving life, you also have friends who aren't supporting and empathizing with what you're going through, and you maybe don't have a robust support system that really gets it. So just want to say it is very normal for this to be an absolute shit cake for many people, and I am sorry that it does take longer for others than it does for, say, some people. I will say, though, that for some avoidant attachers, if they get dumped by an avoidant partner like this, they, interestingly enough, can usually be better off sometimes at healing from this, just because their capacity to detach and also to compartmentalize means that they may be more robust at moving on very quickly off the back of this, to their detriment down the road though, because then they still have to work through all that compartmentalized crap later on, and that can hit them pretty badly down the road too. So just to let you know, the avoidant attachers also have to deal with the abrupt breakups too. Next question. Sorry if I missed the answer. Had connection issues. My avoidant ex ended our perfect relationship abruptly, wants to be friends, but is jealous of any attention from other men. What is that about? Okay, so presuming this person's also not a narcissist, let's just say generally, for a lot of avoidant attachers, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want rules for you, but not for them. And by the way, this is the severe avoidant attachers I'm talking about. Often I find if they've broken up with you, but still want access to you, they may say things like, I want to be single and discover myself, but I don't want you to go dating anyone else. It can really be a case of them still wanting to reserve you as an option for themselves and to also feel like they still have access to you. It's a bit of a narky kind of trait. Doesn't mean the person has narcissistic personality disorder. It just simply means this person wants to maintain access to you without necessarily committing to you. It's a pretty awful experience to have. So that's where that jealousy can come out, where they're like, I don't like you dating other people because it makes me feel insecure. If they're truly like really narcissistic, they will double down on that and punish you and just try and separate you from other people from actually ever feeling like you're about to leave them. So again, bit of discernment required for your case, but generally speaking, that's how it can show up with avoidant attachers. Next question. Sorry if I've posted this twice, but avoidant husband left me. Oh, yeah, read that one. All good. Let's take a look. I'm just going to also go back to the box and see what I've got here too. Let's see. How do you reconnect with a dismissive avoidant who left you after 3 years based on a hypothetical fear and feels safe enough to rebuild in face of uncertain life and career changes? I'm assuming this question's coming from the place of you want to reach out to your avoidant partner and also reconnect over things too. If that is the case, I would say that if you're looking to reconnect with an avoidant partner who ran away from you out of fear, which they all do, and you want to try and reconnect with them, I think the thing that you have to be very mindful of in that circumstance is your expectations around this. Many avoidant attachers, they may people please and say, oh yeah, let's reconnect, let's do this, but never actually follow up on it. Sometimes they have even cancelled last minute, ignored your calls when they said they call you. And it really, again, boils down to willingness and readiness to want to try and work on things. So it's pretty hard to reconnect with these people if they're not in the same headspace as you in terms of working through this. I'm going to answer one more question and then I'm going to call this a day, because I think that with regards to this, I've really appreciated all the questions you've asked me here today, guys. Thank you very much for being part of this. So I'll answer one more question and then I will call it a day before I wrap up. Last one here. I broke up with my avoidant partner and he completely ghosted me for 4 months. Is this a control thing? There was zero closure and it left me sad that he doesn't attempt to keep me. Okay, kind of similar to the experience I mentioned where I talked about someone abruptly blocking you after breaking up with you. That seems to me like a very strong feeling of fear from the person who you were dating. It sounds like he just sort of cut and ran because he couldn't face the feelings of guilt and shame that he had around you. It's kind of like putting you in a corner and being like, I never want to deal with that again. And it's a terrible thing to go through. So I'm sorry that you've had that experience, because I think that with that, I would read that as potentially a control thing. It's that whole thing of I just don't want to be anywhere near you. I don't feel safe around you. I don't want to own up to my own stuff in this too because it's too scary. So in that sense, I think whilst there is a bit of control, I'd also tie that in with fear. I think there is a lot of fear of owning up and taking responsibility for that. All right, just to round out before I wrap up this live, thank you all of you who have attended. I really appreciated seeing you all here today. Just as a reminder, my course, Heartbreak Grief Relief, is coming out tomorrow. So if you want to get it at 50% off for 50 Australian dollars, do so now. And this is a 4-week self-paced course. You can do it however long you like. And it's a really good opportunity to help you navigate your healing and recovery. It's not a heartbreak cure. It's also not a substitute for all the therapy that's out there that may be required for you, or even medication if you require it. It's really just there to help you gain a bit more control and direction for how to navigate your recovery. Thank you again. This is now going to be a video that you can watch on repeat, and I really appreciate you guys joining. Guys and girls, I should say. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.